intercept Japanese supply convoys moving under the cover of darkness. The night was quiet, almost serene, until radar blips and vigilant lookouts confirmed fast-moving silhouettes, Japanese destroyers threading their way through the Solomon Islands. Engines hummed low, torpedo tubes aligned, crews bracing. Then came the moment. Long metallic cylinders were launched from deck-mounted racks. Torpedoes meant to sink ships 10 times the size of a PT boat cut silently through the water. In this skirmish, as in hundreds more across the Pacific, American PT crews fired over 700 torpedoes, nearly all of them missing. Eyewitness accounts describe the surreal chaos. Torpedoes gliding through the water, some detonating too early, many veering off course, most disappearing without a trace. That night, not a single hit was recorded. The destroyers sailed away unscathed, while word of the failed attacks reached Japanese command. Admirals reportedly laughed. One allegedly scoffed, "They sting like mosquitoes but cannot break skin." Why did this happen? How could one of the most technologically advanced navies repeatedly fail in such spectacular fashion? The answer lies in a troubled weapon, the Mark 8 torpedo. Developed during World War I, the Mark 8 was already obsolete by 1941, yet it remained the standard issue on PT boats. Its range was short, guidance primitive, and detonation deeply flawed. American sailors repeatedly reported failures in combat, but higher command insisted the problem lay with the operators. The story is also one of overconfidence. American military leadership believed speed and daring could overcome technological shortcomings. PT boats were envisioned as nimble mosquito fleets, harassing enemy convoys under darkness. In practice, these wooden boats were lightly armored, poorly armed, and often sent on missions almost guaranteed to fail. Yet through these failures came adaptation. Crews learned, tactics evolved, and eventually better weapons were developed. But not before hundreds of torpedoes were wasted, countless opportunities lost, and immense personal risk endured. The PT boat was born from a bold idea: small, fast, and lethal. As World War II loomed, the U.S. Navy envisioned a craft that could strike hard and vanish before the enemy could respond. Patrol torpedo boats traded heavy armor and large guns for speed and stealth, darting between islands, slipping past larger ships. The concept had roots in World War I but lacked endurance and reliable engines. By the 1930s, technological advances made the idea viable. The Navy launched a competition inviting private companies to design high-speed torpedo boats. Elco, a division of Electric Launch Company, won. Their 80-foot wooden boats could exceed 40 knots and carry 4 torpedoes, enough on paper to sink a cruiser. But from the beginning there were cracks. Plywood hulls were light and fast but extremely fragile. A single destroyer gun burst could reduce a PT boat to splinters. Armor was minimal, usually just a thin shield around the cockpit or engine. Crews of 12 to 17 men endured cramped, dangerous conditions, with almost no protection if things went wrong. The Navy also overestimated how close PT boats could realistically approach enemy ships before launching torpedoes. The Mark 8 required near-perfect angles to strike effectively. In the chaos of night combat, with smoke, fog, and darkness obscuring targets, those conditions were rare. Nevertheless, the Navy embraced the vision. PT boats were glamorous and symbolic of American ingenuity. They were cheaper to produce than destroyers or cruisers, and could be deployed in large numbers across the Pacific's islands. Publicity elevated PT boats' reputation, especially after Lieutenant John F. Kennedy's PT-109 was cut in half by a Japanese destroyer in 1943. His survival and heroism became a national story, cementing the boat's mythos. Behind the scenes, frustration mounted. Many early patrols returned without sighting the enemy. When they did engage, torpedoes often failed or missed entirely. Japanese ships, particularly destroyers, quickly learned to evade attacks, zigzagging and returning fire with deadly accuracy. Wooden boats were no match for steel hulls with radar, spotlights, and rapid-firing guns. Despite these dangers, PT crews persisted, operating from forward bases such as Tagi, Renova, and Green Island. Nightly missions involved laying mines, rescuing down pilots, delivering supplies, and occasionally achieving a rare torpedo hit. By 1943, it was clear. The Mark 8 torpedo was deeply unreliable. This reality clashed with optimistic Navy doctrine. PT boats were intended to disrupt Japanese supply lines, yet increasingly became known for bravery without results. The Mark 8 torpedo was a relic from 1911, largely unchanged since World War I. By 1941, it was already outdated. On paper, it seemed formidable: 21-inch diameter, 21 feet long, a nearly 500-pound TNT warhead, and a steam-powered wet heater engine capable of 36 knots with a 16,000-yard range. In practice, it was anything but. The contact exploder often failed on glancing blows, the torpedo ran too deep, and the gyro mechanism could malfunction, sending it wildly off course or in loops. Sailors called them circular runners or sea ghosts. Occasionally, a Mark 8 circled back toward its own boat, forcing evasive maneuvers to avoid disaster. Crews recognized the problem instantly. After-action reports citing dud torpedoes, missed opportunities, and deep-running errors flooded command. Yet the Navy resisted, blaming sailors rather than weapons. This disconnect between frontline reality and bureaucracy cost lives and opportunities. The Mark 8 also lacked stealth and range. Fired torpedoes left visible wakes, alerting Japanese crews and giving them time to evade. Steam power produced noise and bubbles, far from ideal for night attacks. These problems were not limited to PT boats. Submarines using the similarly flawed Mark 14 torpedo experienced the same frustrations. Many of these issues could have been discovered in testing, but live-fire trials were rare due to cost. By late 1943, the Mark 8 was phased out in favor of the Mark 13 torpedo, shorter, lighter, and far more reliable. By then, the damage had been done. Hundreds of torpedoes were wasted. Missions failed, and enemy ships survived encounters they should not have. Failures were not only mechanical but institutional. They exposed the danger of ignoring frontline feedback, the cost of placing faith in untested technology. PT boat sailors risked everything while their most powerful weapon functioned like a slot machine. 4 torpedoes could be fired with hope that one might hit, and even then, hope it would detonate. Viewed through Japanese eyes, PT boats were irritating but ultimately harmless. Fubuki-class destroyers were fast, heavily armed, and experienced in night combat. The Type 93 Long Lance torpedo outperformed Allied torpedoes in range and destructive power. At first cautious, Japanese commanders soon realized PT boats rarely hit anything. Repeated encounters showed dozens of torpedoes fired with little or no effect. One admiral likened them to mosquitoes, irritating yet incapable of harm. Another officer called them toys with firecrackers, not real weapons. Japanese destroyers adapted easily. They increased speed, used spotlights to detect incoming PT boats, and employed heavier machine guns. Dedicated counter-PT vessels were unnecessary. For the Americans, daring attacks often resulted in humiliation rather than disruption. The Mosquito Fleet, so brave, became a source of amusement to the enemy. The figure of 700 torpedoes missed is cumulative, spanning dozens of patrols across the Solomons and New Guinea between 1942 and 1943. U.S. Navy patrol records confirm this activity. Single boats carried 4 torpedoes and operated nightly, with squadrons firing hundreds over months. By late 1943, assessments showed fewer than 10% of attacks caused measurable damage, with many zones seeing hit rates near zero. The narrative became emblematic of technical failure, bureaucratic denial, and mismanagement. The consequences were profound. PT boats failed to disrupt Japanese supply lines. The Tokyo Express ran largely unimpeded, reinforcing enemy positions and prolonging campaigns. Morale suffered. Crews questioned the purpose of nightly runs as missions returned with expended torpedoes and no results. Higher command reconsidered the PT boat's role. Originally strike craft, they were increasingly assigned secondary missions: rescue, reconnaissance, supply delivery, and mine laying. Improvements arrived late. By late 1943 to early 1944, the Mark 13 torpedo began replacing the unreliable Mark 8. Shorter, lighter, and more consistent, it could be launched from closer range, improving hit probability. But the war in the Solomons had shifted. Radar, aircraft, and faster destroyers were redefining naval warfare. PT boat tactics evolved alongside technology. They became rescue specialists, amphibious support vessels, and intelligence gatherers. In battles like Surigao Strait, PT boats detected approaching fleets, relaying intelligence that enabled ambushes and tactical victories. PT boats became symbols of improvisation, leadership, and courage. Officers such as John F. Kennedy and Robert Bulkley became legends for their grit, not for sinking large ships. They represented small crews, raw innovation, and unwavering determination. Post-war, the Navy acknowledged the program's transformation. PT boats never became decisive ship killers, but they proved their worth through countless small victories. Lessons endured: rigorous testing, respect for frontline feedback, and alignment of strategy with technology. Buka Island, Solomon Sea, August 2, 1943. Silence, then a barrage of torpedoes from the shadows. Nothing hit. Engines fade into the distance. Japanese commanders laugh. For Americans, humiliation. For Japanese, tactical relief. For history, a warning: theory and vision cannot overcome untested reality. The 700 torpedoes that missed are not just misfires. They represent flawed assumptions, bureaucratic denial, and the cost of unproven weapons. Yet the courage of PT crews turned failure into resilience. The Japanese may have laughed, but in the end, the mosquitoes stung in unexpected ways. The lessons are clear. Technology alone is hollow. Field feedback is vital. True strength lies in adaptation, perseverance, and courage even when tools fail. History transforms triumphs into legends and failures into enduring lessons. Remember the small boats that fired 700 torpedoes and hit nothing, but ultimately changed the Navy forever.